everybody in on a Sunday morning. But I just want to welcome everybody this morning and thank you all for making the time to come down today. Chief Mills and I wanted to offer the community a chance to learn more about what happened with the Black Lives Mural Friday night and the steps that the city and our police will be taking over the coming days, and to be here to answer your questions and hear your concerns today. I don't know many of you in this group, in this audience, but I just want to introduce myself. I'm Meyers. I'm the mayor of Santa Cruz, and I want to introduce my colleagues that are here. I know other council members will also be arriving. Vice Mayor Sonia Bruner is here this morning. Councilmember Shevra Kalantari Johnson is also here this morning. So I just want to make sure you're able to see them in the meeting as well today. The Black Lives Mural was unanimously supported by the Santa Cruz City Council when proposed by a group of community members after George Floyd's murder. The mural is considered a public art installation guided and funded by community members who desired a reminder of the struggles Black members of our community endure locally and across the nation. This mural is a part of our Civic Center, and it is a place where people gather and celebrate each year an act of painting the mural to create a statement acknowledging the continued work to address racism in our society. The targeted vandalism of the Black Lives mural is heartbreaking and violating. I can assure you all of my City Council colleagues will work closely with our community to repair this damage as soon as possible, and more importantly, to combat the roots of why such an act was committed. I'd like to ask Vice Mayor Bruner to share some words with you this morning, and then we will have Chief Mills provide you with details about what happened and how the investigation is going. I will also invite City Manager Martine Bernal to provide an update on when the mural will be repainted and community involvement in that. And then we are really happy to stay for discussions and questions you may have. I want to thank everybody again for being here this morning. And really, the intent of the meeting today is really for you to discuss with us what do we need to do, not only with the mural and getting that important symbolic gesture replaced at our Civic Center, but also more importantly, to continue to knit our community back together and also to acknowledge the wrongs that have been done. And it is really a heartbreaking and heart-wrenching situation. I arrived on the site yesterday, pretty much by myself, after being notified by a community member, and I do want to thank that community member. 2 community members reported this to me, and as soon as I received that information, I did go down, and Chief Mills and Martine Bernal were seconds behind me. Santa Cruz Police arrived within a few minutes of me notifying them and immediately began an investigation. So I do want you to know that our police department is taking this violation very, very seriously. And I'm going to go ahead and ask Vice Mayor Bruner if she'd like to say a few words. And then Chief Mills will give you details about the investigation. And then we're open for questions and also community discussion afterwards. So thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor, do you mind speaking at the podium? We can hear you better.
Like at it? Or
You're right behind it, right behind, yeah, where the 2 mics are.
Oh, you're nice in here.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Thank you, everyone. It's so wonderful to see this turnout. I think I would like to start off by thanking Mayor Meyers and thanking Chief Andy Mills for the quick response and action for this unbelievable action that happened, and I think that spoke a lot, that we have so many dedicated officials and community members willing to come together to work together on this. So, for the officers to just drop everything and make this a #1 priority spoke volumes to me. As an elected official, I really am committed to working forward in this. just a reminder that there's still so much that our community, as much progress as we've made, there's still so much that needs to happen. And, you know, it's actions like what happened that remind us that we still have the work to be done, and we have to keep going. So as a community member, as a woman of color, this is very, very hard. I'm holding back some feelings. And it's really scary. It's really scary. And while, you know, in our role, we have no, we do not dictate, for example, school policy, education. There's a lot of pieces to this. I am committed to working with our organizations, our schools, everything that needs to happen. There's so many pieces. After seeing the action and the laughter around it was absolutely shocking. And that is out there is a reminder that we have to keep going. And so it was really important to provide this space for all of us to hear each other, for all of us to be updated with accurate and factual information to date, and for all of us to understand process. I know I had a lot of conversations with our city attorney's office and you know, with our police in terms of what these charges are, what the penal code and California law versus being a municipal code and city attorney's office prosecuting, so learning about those differences. Also, we have Elaine Johnson here with the DA's office and neighborhood courts, right? There were a lot of community members that felt, you know, an education piece where the people who did this would be needed in terms of a neighborhood court type of approach. And the fact that this is a felony charge does not make it eligible for neighborhood courts. And so there's a lot of information to learn about and to understand in this action. And what are our steps forward? How do we heal? How do we process? And future actions. And it all comes with us as elected officials, advocating to our California, the judicial system. They're the ones who prosecute and the charges, so it's not just police and council members. There's a whole system that we need to continue fighting and advocating to keep this work moving forward. So I'm so glad that the community, we have some really active community members working in their own ways towards, you know, a more equitable, anti-racist Santa Cruz, and I see their faces here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the work that you are doing. Thank you to the artists who made this mural happen. As Mayor Meyers said, it was a public art installation as an acknowledgement and as a reminder. And I know we have one of the artists here today, and the other two are out of town, and perhaps they're watching via the live streams. I know they would have wanted to be here as well. And I know our city manager is working with city staff on a timeline which will be updated on repairing the physical damage. But I do have to say there is emotional, psychological, and just in my soul damage. And I know it's not just me that, you know, can that be repaired? And how do we go about continuing that healing process? So thank you. I'm open to any input. I've heard from a lot of community members since yesterday morning. I got the call early, headed down, and you know, took some photos and saw the site as I was on my way out of town to visit my mother. It was really good to hear from a lot of the community members. So thank you. And I will invite discussion after we hear some of the updates from our police chief and our city manager. And thank you for being here. It really means a lot.
Well, thank you, Mayor and Vice Mayor, and thank you for our community for coming and being part of this process, because this is important. And so yesterday morning about 7 o'clock, I got a call from the mayor saying that the Black Lives Matter had been vandalized. Black Lives Matter mural had been vandalized, and immediately called our Baywatch sergeant to assign an officer, a capable officer, to conduct a preliminary investigation. That was done immediately. The officer went out there, surveyed the damage, which appears to be a lot more than the $450 that would rise it above into the felony range. And so we called in detectives from home, and detectives immediately began collecting additional evidence and making sure that we were conducting this investigation properly. We also consulted with the district attorney's office to make sure that we stayed on the right path, and we were looking at things that we needed to see, as well as getting approval for search warrants and orders to preserve on social media. Throughout the day, the investigation continued, and I really want to acknowledge numerous members of the community who called us, gave us information, sent us videos, and actually did some of the detective work on the front side. And I don't want to go into their names for fear of reprisal for some of those folks, but I can tell you that we had dozens of calls coming to our communications center to me personally and to the detectives. This really struck a chord with many of our community members. The Black community, the community at large, the people of color in our community felt this was a personal attack. And let's face it, of the 5,000 plus street segments in our city, that was the only one. We can see what took place here. This wasn't just a couple kids fooling around, doing a burnout on the street. This was an intentional act of vandalism on something that our community holds dear, a symbol of hope, as Brenda Griffin termed it yesterday when I spoke with her. She's the local president of the NAACP. So yesterday afternoon, about 2 o'clock, we contacted one of the suspects that had been identified. He was brought into the station. He came in on his own. He was interviewed, gave us information, and he was released based on the amount of information that we had right then. We tracked down another suspect. We brought that suspect in. He gave us additional information, and based on the evidence that we saw, based on the information that both provided, we were able to arrest both of them for charges of vandalism at the felony level for 594 PC and for conspiracy 182 PC. These are both charges that will move forward. We are still working because there are other people involved, and we want to make sure that we interview everybody. And my suggestion to them, if they see this media piece, why don't you proactively come in and talk with us and tell us what took place and why. So we have enough information to charge them with a felony crime. They're both booked into jail last night, and my understanding is they were released on bail. That is up to the courts and to the jail. That has nothing to do with our department. 2 suspects arrested were Brandon Bochat of Santa Cruz, age 20, and Hagen Warner, age 19, of Boulder Creek. They will appear in court sometime next week and for arraignment, and that will be, again, up to the district attorney's office to file those charges. You'll notice that a hate crime charge was not part of this. We are still working to collect information and data. What I don't want to do is bring forward a weak case. If there's enough to charge the person, we will collect the evidence. We will make sure that the district attorney sees it and allow them to add those charges should we collect enough evidence to warrant that, to establish the probable cause. The investigation continues. There's a lot of work still to be done. We have orders into the social media companies to preserve all those accounts. We will read those accounts and collect the information that's needed to determine what other charges might be appropriate. If I can just say one thing from a personal side. For those who seek to minimize the events that took place, to negate the responsibility of, they're just kids fooling around, shame on you. This was meaningful to this community. And we will do everything within our power to make sure that those who did this are brought to justice. And for those who think that it's just not that big of a deal, that they can point fingers at other crimes and say, why aren't you dealing with that? We're dealing with this right now. And we'll deal with those other things too. But let me assure you that this is a substantial wound to members of our community. And as a police department, we will invest the resources necessary to protect all of our community members, including the Black community. I'm sure we'll have opportunity to answer questions later, and we'll take it from there. City Manager, Martin Bernal.
Thank you, Chief. We'd like to obviously repaint the mural as soon as possible. And so we are working closely with the Santa Cruz Equity Collaborative, who is the organization that we work to establish the mural. And staff from our Economic Development Department, Kathy Mintz, who's here, will be helping to coordinate with the artist and the organization to get that repair and repainting done as soon as possible. So that work is in progress currently, and we don't have specific dates yet. But as soon as we have that information, we'll make sure and share it with the community. In the meantime, if you have any questions for us, Kathy is a good contact. She's the arts coordinator in the city's Economic Development Department. And she's here if you have any questions. But again, we want to get the mural repaired as soon as possible. It was recently repainted, so it was actually in pretty pristine condition. So unfortunately, it was damaged, and as soon as we can get it repaired, the better. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And yeah, again, I just want, everyone to know that the city will throw all the resources needed to right this wrong. As I stand here, I'm starting to shake more and more. I think about the images that I looked at a lot yesterday, and it breaks my heart. And we will bring these guys to justice, and we will work as hard as we can to not let these things continue in our community. It's time to stop all of this. I will go ahead and facilitate questions. I don't mind doing that. I imagine the press might have some questions first, so I think I'll let you guys go first, and then certainly I'll turn it over to the community after that. And yeah, just let me know. Maybe, Andy, I imagine a lot of this will be for you, but maybe Martine, come on up. I'll take this question first here, and then the one in the back.
Yeah, just as far as the justice for these gentlemen go, what is that going to look like, do you think? What kind of time, what kind of penalties or whatever are they facing?
So obviously we cannot predict that, but It's a felony charge, so the potential is imprisonment in a state prison. However likely or unlikely that might be.
Chief, in terms of the hate crime that you said you can't use because of the weak case, how much more do you need in order to prove it's a hate crime? Because on the bottom of some of it, it says BLM is a joke, so how much more would you need to bring forward that hate crime argument?
So, based on the statute, we need to have it specifically targeted towards, there's a variety of things listed, one of which is, for instance, people of color. So determining whether it was an attack on the organization or the individuals who comprise the organization will be an important piece. We believe that taking a look at the media accounts of those people might boost it to that level. If it does, it will be forwarded. And just to correct you, I did not say it's a weak case. I just want to make sure it's the best case possible to bring forward.
Back to you.
Yes, so do we have any recent history of hate crimes in Santa Cruz in the last year, maybe 5 years, 10 years? Do you happen to know those numbers? Or?
You know, I apologize, I don't know those numbers right off the top of my head, but I know recently we took a gentleman to the federal courts where he was convicted of a hate crime, and I know that there have been several others that we have arrested people for as well.
How many others are you looking for for this instance?
At least 2 others.
One more journalist, it looks like, journalist, are you journalists too? Okay, one more, yeah, go ahead, please.
So, I mean, right before, like literally the day before this happened, was the Rise Together event in Aptos. Do you think there might be any connection here? Or?
Yeah, I was at the Rise Together event, as well as Councilmember Shebra Kaltari Johnson and many others. That did certainly enter our minds because the timing was very close. And so, but we cannot establish that at this point.
You said the difference for the bill you said that the hate crime depends on whether it's directed at the Black community or BLM. Why would it not be considered a hate crime if it were directed at the organization BLM?
The local what? I can't hear you.
Oh, the local, like the Black community. You said to establish whether or not you can charge this as a hate crime. There's a difference between whether they were targeting the movement or people. Why would it matter?
Well, if somebody doesn't like an organization, regardless of what that organization is, that's one thing. If people are targeting the people of color, that's a different thing. So it's a nuanced piece that we're going to have to work through to make sure that we can articulate before the courts to make sure that there's adequate cause there. So people cannot like an organization, and they can speak out against that. That's not a crime. But doing the same thing on, towards a person or group of people is different.
Yeah.
Good morning. I have a question about sort of the restorative justice piece. It sounds like they are going to be dealt with in sentencing at this point, and that since they do have a felony charge, they're not eligible for neighborhood courts. But what I'm wondering is that the end of the story, or is there a way to have them, their parents, their school, or anything like that, engaged with this process to have healing, not just punishment?
So the question is restorative justice, is there potential for that? Because we bring forward charges that are at the felony level, the district attorney can issue them at whatever level they choose. He's an independent elected official, and they can fully do that. The courts may have something completely different in mind as part of a plea deal or an agreement. We have no idea where that's going to go at this point. And so there's always that potential for some level of restorative justice where they can make right what they did wrong to this community should they be convicted of that.
Just a quick follow-up on that. One of the ideas that some of us have talked about is to have them actually repaint it themselves, if possible.
And keep maintenance on it.
Back in the back here, Deb.
First of all, I want to thank both of you for
for your immediate responsiveness to this issue. We are all here because this was a public event that we all know about. But these young men did not decide to engage in an act of violent racism overnight. And this is starting with our children. We have one very brave young girl here today. And this is happening daily in our schools. I have 2 teens. They share with me a lot about what's happening to them. And there are racist incidents occurring in our schools every single day. And I know these are children and they need to be educated, but we need to do more. And the criticisms of critical race theory and the reluctance of our school district to take leadership rather than follow the lowest common denominator that are stating issues is unacceptable. And as a community, we can't tolerate this anymore. So I think we need to work starting in our public schools at the preschool level to ensure that we don't produce any more 19 and 20-year-olds who are going to violate the rights of anyone in our community.
Are there any other questions regarding the case or other items? Yes, sir, in the back.
Good morning, Chief Mills. I would like to applaud you and your colleague detectives for the swift action that you guys took yesterday apprehending individuals. However, I would like to know what steps or measures will be taken in the future to preserve the integrity of the mural.
So, shortly after the mural was put in, we had a concern that at some point there might be an act of vandalism. And we took measures and I don't want to specifically go into those, but we took measures to make sure that we would be able to collect evidence should that take place. And those are still in place and they will remain in place.
Thank you.
Just for one, I don't condone the actions of any of these young people who did this. I think it's wrong. I think it's complete vandalism, for one. For two, I have a primary concern that because of the police departments and the press releases, Facebook posts or Instagram posts, I see a lot of threats towards their life for something that's probably a simple act of vandalism. And personally, I think that the police department and the DA's direction that they're taking on these type of approaches could cause more damage than actually good to the community. Not hating on anyone, I'm not trying to say you guys are awful people or anything, just personally from what I see on the Facebook posts, what other people are commenting, I feel like for the charges that are being brought, they should have justice, they should do community service, potentially jail time. But I personally feel like the Facebook posts and all the Instagram posts I'm seeing could do more damage than good in this case, and I don't mean that in an offensive way. I think the mural's good, moral's good, or whatever it is. I just don't. I'm kind of concerned about like what's going to happen to these kids afterwards. It's caused a lot of people in the community to have death threats. I mean, maybe look into some of those threats as well. And personally, I've seen some worse stuff that's never had a community meeting.
I've got a lot of hands around this.
Okay, I just haven't seen a lot of community meetings on this stuff, on worse things. And so it's kind of weird to me how this is almost like, I don't want to call it virtue signaling, but that's almost what I feel like it is. I'm not trying to be rude by saying that, I'm trying to be respectful.
I'm going to move on.
Go ahead.
Thank you for your comments.
All right.
I've got Abby.
I respectfully would like to respond to that. That what are possible equal repercussions for the psychological damage that's done when a Black community continues to watch young white men active in impunity and terrorizing the Black community? And so this wasn't a simple act of vandalism. This was a terrorist act against a Black community.
I do not agree with racism.
It's not just a simple act of violence, of vandalism. This is actually an act of violence. It's psychological damage. And I can say that because I've experienced it. I'm sorry that you haven't, and you're lucky that you haven't. I'm not trying to be disrespectful.
Please, you had your time, and I'd like to have Abby, and everyone here gets time to talk. We're not gonna.
This is this is restorative justice in this case would be something that I can't even suggest because black
Come
boys
on.
have been lynched for way less, for
Come
the
on.
accusation of less.
Okay.
So in our community where we've seen our people be completely traumatized, be lynched, be jailed, be harassed continuously for less, to say that they're getting threats and we should be concerned with that when the psychological damage from all of this is still going to weigh in on us years from now after having to watch this is not at the same level.
No.
Okay.
So I hear what you're saying and I just want to correct you on that because you're wrong.
Well, just an opinion.
Any other questions? Can we move on to comments, Jester, please?
Yeah, just really quick, these other two suspects that you're looking for or hope to come in, what was their role in this whole thing?
That has yet to be determined, that's why they're, the follow-up will be conducted as part of it.
So one of the things that I'm still a little confused about, you mentioned the trying to group between an act towards an individual or versus a group, especially with the word Black Lives Matter getting across the street and that being a large nationwide movement. How would you be able to prove the difference between a distaste for a group and a distaste for an individual? Absolutely.
It's a difficult thing to divide and think through, but that's why we want to take our time to put this case together correctly. If the evidence is there, again, we will charge those individuals with the hate crime. This is not unusual. Frequently we get churches that are vandalized. Just the mere fact that the church got vandalized doesn't make it a hate crime, even though that's one of the protected areas. If, now, for instance, a synagogue has a swastika painted on it, it's obviously a hate crime. I think we can safely articulate that. Or if a black church is burned, there's obviously more to this that we need to investigate and take a look at. But I think prima facie on that, it looks like a hate crime. In my, for many of us who look at this particular event, because there's only one Black Lives Matter mural in probably 5,000 segments of streets in our city, and that happens to be the only street that they did this on, I don't think it takes a genius to figure out what the target was. But being able to articulate that and to build enough evidence to be successful in court is what we're after, and to make sure that we do this the right way.
Joy in the back.
So my question is, I've been thinking about this a lot, how, because it is so nuanced, and I understand that, and it's frustrating. So how then, at least to start in the city of Santa Cruz, do we change that policy, do we change that law, so that when any non-government entity that has an affiliation with, say, like a Jewish, like a temple or a mosque or something that can be a marginalized group, when it is vandalized, that does become, no matter what, a hate crime. How do we do that as a community? Because this is a hate crime. I know you know that, and I know that, and I trust that you are searching for every way to get it to be called a hate crime. But we are up against something that is systematic, that doesn't allow us to call a spade a spade. And so we need to figure out how do we, like I said, at least in this community, to agendize, to move forward, to make it a law, that if it's just a tag on a mosque or a temple, that is a non-government, a private entity, that it is considered a hate crime.
Yes, let me just adjust our investigation, and then I'll have Cassie talk about the hate crime, legislation piece. Our responsibility is to be objective purveyors of fact. And so we're going to collect the evidence and then bring that forward. And if it's there, it's there. If it's not, Unfortunately, it's not. And, but I do understand your thirst for something better legislatively. And so we have our interim or acting city attorney, Cassie Bronson, and I think Cassie can answer that.
Hi, I'm Cassie. It's a pleasure to be here with you all today. Just to speak to a couple of the questions of the legalities of this. First of all, the distinction between Black Lives Matter organization and Black Lives, Black people, I realize that's a very tricky thing, and I think it'll ultimately be up to the district attorney to decide whether or not those charges are strong enough. So I just want to sort of emphasize that. As for what further can we do, there's an issue, right now the charges are being brought under the penal code, which is state law. The city makes the municipal code, which is city law. And so I was on a phone call last night with our vice mayor, and we're definitely looking into what more can be done so that if we feel there's gaps in state law, that potentially there might be an option to address it under the municipal code. But that's research that's being done, and we're looking into that, and we're committed to working with our elected officials to see what can be done and help us through that process.
Henry in the back, did you have a question or a comment?
Just got a comment. I was in speedfitting in front of the Mural. I hosted the Juneteenth march in front of that very same site, and I was blessed on 2 years in a row to be invited by the same perspective lab because my Juneteenth efforts to come and be part of the event and think Black Lives Matter. And so for me this morning, I'm very upset, and to be blunt, I'm very pissed off to be here. I didn't want to be here as a Black individual, and as a community within Santa Cruz, let's be blunt about it, there's very few Black folks in this community, so I'm very insulted when things are being downplayed that this is not big of a deal, which is very much big of a deal. Just thinking about right now, what's going on systemically right now around the country, when there's banning things like critical race theory and other educational tools to teach social systemic issues, how to further and progress as a community. And when I see things like this, that's a reflection of what's happening in our society. And my form of restorative justice is I do not want Santa Cruz Equity Collab to lift a finger on repainting this. I want the perpetrators to personally repaint this. Today because I feel that as much money they're willing to take on being out on bond, they need to pay for the damages. That not a city nor the Santa Cruz Equity Collab need to lift a financial finger. The perpetrators as well as the perpetrators' families and loved ones who took the time to pay their bill didn't have enough money to fix these things. Right?
Thomas, real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I'll get down and then question.
So I have a question separating this like Black Lives Matter from the Black Lives Matter organization, which is not a thing. There's no Black Lives Matter organization. It's the Black Lives Matter Foundation, right? And we didn't get. I'm part of the SCPD Equity Collab. We didn't get funding from the Black Lives Matter Foundation. So I don't know. To me, it's really clear that this is against Black Lives Matter. I mean, it didn't say Black Lives Matter Foundation on the pavement. And when you ask these guys, like, what were you against? It said the organization. I can pretty much guarantee they can articulate the foundation versus the actual Black Lives Matter. I mean, it's pretty blunt, right? Like this said, Black Lives Matter. I'm shaking right now because I don't want to talk. I don't want to be here, to be honest with y'all. I mean, it just seems even legally, it doesn't have any ground. Like Black Lives Matter Foundation, maybe you can answer that because I know you're smiling over there, so.
I'm sure there is case law to be developed as to this issue, and I do think it'll be up to the district attorney to decide whether or not this really fits the bill.
It seems so, like the Black Lives Matter movement is already pretty loose, and so what worries me is that they're going to be like, yeah, it's the organization we were against, and there's not going to be a clear way of proving that because the Black Lives Matter movement is already so grassroots. It's already so all over the place. There's like people who disagree with different things that we do, and you know, it's not a typical organization. And so that's just my concern, that this is not going to be just because the organization had to historically be grassroots and have not a clear defined leadership, because guess what, in the past, our leadership were killed, you know? And so we had to make it so you can't put a finger on us, you know, and that's why it's still alive, you know? So good luck trying to, you know, pin down an organization. I don't think it's going to happen. So how can we change the law of hate crime to be just?
The hate crimes laws we're proceeding under are state law. So I encourage you, you know, to be active at the state law level and to reach out to your state law legislators about this. And like I said, city's committed to doing what we can within our lane and what we're legally permitted to do, what we're not preempted from doing.
So you're saying we should do the work?
Well,
We should all do the work.
we're all gonna do the work.
Sorry.
And
Still triggered.
And I will definitely commit that Vice Mayor Bruder and I will meet with Mark Stone and John Laird as soon as possible, even as early as tomorrow if we can, get everybody with their staff. We've already lined up a number of meetings for tomorrow. So starting Monday morning, the Vice Mayor and I will be doing as much work as we can as electeds. We are not the people who can prosecute or bring charges, but we certainly can raise hell because we are electeds and we represent you. So that's what we'll do. But I just want to make sure and keep everybody, you know, Cassie's here in a very difficult position. You know, the law, unfortunately, does not make sense to most of us. And so it's a hard thing to answer questions that are being brought up. Take you and then Deb and then in the back. Thanks.
I think.
Sorry.
I really wanted to go next.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Because this
I know
tied into a previous comment
Okay.
statement
You got it.
on a budgetary thing. It's more for the Arts Commission than you guys up there. But thank you for protecting the city, Mayor. Thank you for all of your hard work. And so this is more of a financial question that I have for the Arts Commission, and that's there's a annual report that gets developed every year for the equity collaborative, I guess. And so at some point I'd like to see that and have that made publicly because I can't seem to locate that. One, and two, I have questions about the mural cost and the initial findings of the minutes for, what was it, July 8th was the closure of it, 2020. And we had a proposed budgetary expense of $3,500 for the mural. And then when the whole thing got commissioned, it was $3,500 approximately for the mural with community members' help, right? So there was volunteers, and volunteers, as I understand it, are free. I volunteer in the community myself. But when it came down to the actual construction of the project, it cost over $17K. And we paid artists and community members to erect and construct the art exhibit. So I have questions on inflation considerations, yearly maintenance, and budgetary expenses like that. And then that also ties in now, I don't condone any crimes, hate crimes, and anything like that. And I don't condone the actions that were done by these teams. I totally am not for that. But I do have a question as far as like in the court of law, when we look at the damage done to something, like, so initially this project was slated for $3,500, and the teens are being charged over, you know, they're being charged the felony charge because of a certain dollar amount, simply just a black and white financial check on accounting. And it's over $450 considering it a felony. And if the commissioned artwork was actually $3,500 as it was originally brought to the public, then it would only be 12% of the overall budget. And the $3,500.
Sir, can you wrap up?
Well, so what I'm just trying to say, is that when we do checks and balances and we're looking at crime valuation versus, property damage and stuff like that, and trying
What
to...
I can suggest is that Mr. Bernal would be happy to either respond to some of the questions you have.
Sure, question statements, specifications, sure.
And then we can also meet with you after if you have specifics about some of those questions.
Yeah, just trying to put apples to apples, really.
But societally speaking and historically speaking, apples to apples is not a thing. Breaking this down, and had these kids been black and done some sort of
But I'm not making a black or white thing, I'm just making a financial.
Answer the question real quickly, Dr.
Thank you.
As I understand it, and Kathy has to resolve the details, but this was funded by the community organization, and it did not involve city funding, so this was not publicly funded. That was a completely community-supported project.
Wonderful.
I have a follow-up to Thomas's question, which is related to mine. I hear that there is legal precedent that separates buildings from human beings. I don't think analogizing an organization to a building, because the organization is its people. And so whether this is an attack against the organization, BLM, or it is against the black community, it's the same thing. And so I think it is dangerous territory for us to try to equate an organization with a building, and I would like to encourage the attorney office and the police department to engage in this as a hate crime, regardless of application. And I don't know if there's legal precedent, maybe Cassie, you can share with us if there's legal precedent that separates organizations from humans, or if we have the opportunity to create a different path forward through this case to not have this distinction happen.
Yes, my name is Meyers. I was working with private building. I just like to echo what Tari has said, and I think that the issue is sort of involved in damaging this property, and I want to see them actually, recreate the whole thing. I think I have more questions about the future of where this goes next and how these kinds of situations are dealt with in the future, and how to prevent these kinds of things. There's the more cosmetic approach, which is essentially the fact that you can put a certain amount of coating and a certain design on the street that where, even if somebody were trying to skid market, potentially protect it in the future, so you can have future investments on the actual shields and protection that we put on these kinds of stuff. But beyond the more cosmetic, changes that we need to see, I'm wondering two things. First, I want to know how you guys define community safety. What does community safety mean to you? What are metrics that we use to determine whether our community is safe or not? Because these are types of behaviors where you see it that are not reported. When it's not the Black Lives Matter mural, I talked to many students that said it's high, Aptos High, at different high schools where they're saying that they get on a day-to-day basis different types of racial abuses and remarks, and it's really frustrating and unfortunate to see our less than 1% Black student population, and only have a few amount of kids graduating high school because of the type of experiences that they've been having. So when this isn't at the fundamental center of our attention, we're seeing the day-to-day basis of this, being a problem, every day. So the question becomes, how do we know if our community is being safe? What metrics do we determine to come up with that understanding of community safety? Are we looking at the mental health of the community? Are we looking at the voting rates to translate to the safety of the community? Are we looking at civic participation? What are we looking at to actually know if our community is safe? That's the first question. And then the second question is, do you believe there needs to be a particular unit or investigatory unit under the Santa Cruz County that focuses specifically on racial incidents in the county? Because I'm looking at the department, Santa Cruz Department of Police and the county sheriff's structure and organizational structure, and looking at every single breakdown from professional units to all the way to the frontline service patrols. There's actually no area that's focusing specifically on racial incidents, that focuses on making sure that we're actually able to prosecute these kinds of cases and that we're able to communicate with society. So do you believe there should also alternatively be this kind of separate anti-racist focus to make sure these kinds of issues are dealt with in the future?
Well, I think you bring up some very valid points about how do we measure community safety. And this is a big question that needs to take place, not only for communities of color, but the LGBTQ community, for many other communities. And yeah, there is the possibility that someone would be responsible for it countywide. You'd have to take a look at the volume of incidents that we get, the impact of those incidents on our community, to determine how do we want to spend our precious tax dollars. I don't make those decisions, but I certainly can implement them. One of the things that we are seeing right now, for instance, is that domestic violence is a really important issue in our community. That also needs a lot of attention, as well as drug addiction. So there's just a lot of balls that we need to keep in the air, and we have to take a look at that. I know that the district attorney's office has hate crimes go to one person. I have detectives that take care of those issues as they come up and get a little bit better training in those things, and maybe we can do a lot more than we have done traditionally in the past. We have a good track record of actually taking those people into custody when they take place, but we can always do more and we can do better. The second piece of that, I think it's really important for us as a community to look at the structure that we have. And we take direction. We are your police department, and if this becomes a priority that warrants it, then we can make those things happen. There's always a cost associated with that. And we want to make sure that we're policing from this community's perspective.
I want to recognize this person for the next comment, but I do want to recognize Councilmember Martine Watkins is in here too, and I want to just give her one moment just to say
Just 1
one.
second.
Yeah.
I just wanted to respond to that, as a member of the Public Safety Committee for the city, that we actually started a conversation about community engagement to redefine public safety. Being beyond police interaction at that point when an incident has occurred, but looking at what are we doing as a community to foster a safe community in our parks for everybody, whatever that might look like. Public safety might look like something different to you than it would to you. So how are we as a community looking at what does public safety actually mean when we say public safety? And that conversation has begun at the public safety committee level. And there's other communities who've done that, the state of Sacramento, Austin, I think Boston. So there's not, we're not creating something that hasn't been done before, but we're looking at what fits for our community. So more to come on that, but I just sort of wanted to respond when you asked them questions about what public safety is. Public safety is also fostering a community that's healthy for all, as opposed to just intervening when an incident has occurred. And so I'm really looking forward to working with you all in our community at the broader level to look at what does public safety look like for our communities.
It goes to show, look around you. When was this meeting broadcasted? You don't think there's an issue here? We're all here, we're not getting paid for this. I want to ask, every one of you guys and the public officials, if you are willing to continue this conversation in a space for us to actually do something about this. I mean, I've grown up here, there's been lots of histories. We can go dive in deeper into that, but we're not going to be able to do it here right now. But I really want to, I'm asking you, Chief Mills, I'm asking you, you're nodding with me, can we continue this conversation? And not, if you can put it in your paid hours, cool, but honestly, you live here too, this is our community that's actually have this difficult conversation, because there's many, I'm here, I see community members of all colors and walks of life, I grew up here as a Latino. I can tell you my experience growing up as a Latino is not the same experience as my black friends growing up here. But you know what? There's the same types of hardships and struggles. You know what I mean? And the same goes with my white friends and socioeconomic backgrounds, but I'm just honestly, I want a response. Can we continue this conversation? Because it's not gonna, we're
I
not gonna
cannot
deal-
speak for the entirety of the city council. You have 4 council members here today, right now. I think that absolutely, this is a very, very damaging situation that has occurred. And I think, I was in conversation with every single council member all day yesterday. We are the council that will take this extremely
Could the
seriously.
community be a part of that conversation? Because I don't want this closed door stuff anymore. I'm tired.
Absolutely. We will, yes, we will be working.
I'd be willing to help facilitate and mediate
I
that
believe the city
conversation.
council will take this situation and want to continue to have additional conversations
Thank
with our
you,
community.
thank you. I appreciate it.
It is noon, I want to make sure I get the rest of the questions that wanted to be asked, so if you could just keep your hands up. I'm gonna go with lady in the, right back there in the back row, please.
I wanted to follow up on what Deborah said. I think what was also heartbreaking about it is, how young these adults are. I'm a high school teacher, and I think that the conversation in terms of restorative justice, they're not going to be painting the street most likely, but maybe if they understand the impact that the acts have on terrorizing us and creating anxiety in us as a Black community, maybe at some point they can go back and speak in the high schools. Because children don't understand their actions. I have a kid in my class who had a Confederate flag in his room when I'm teaching on Zoom, and he refused to take it down. And there was no precedent really almost to make him take it down. And he's not the only one. So we need education. I think we should involve Ferris Sabah. He's the superintendent. He's amazing. And then from there, he can work with all the other superintendents, because we need this to happen, like you said, at preschool, elementary, middle school, and high school, so that this doesn't continue to happen.
Thank you. Thank you.
In the past couple of weeks, a similar act of hateful vandalism was committed on the intersection and to memorialize the Pulse nightclub shooting. It was a similar act committed with Meyers, skid marks. Do you think the same act of animus should also be seen as equivalent? Because it was obviously, it wasn't directed at an organization. He was disrespecting not just the survivors of the Pulse nightclub shooting, but the fallen. It was obviously an act of animus against the LGBTQ community. Do you think that, given that that went viral and given that that could have inspired this act, that you think we can draw the same?
I'm gonna turn this, I don't know about that particular situation, so I'm gonna just ask Andy if that was reported or not. Certainly if it wasn't, that's a sign as well, so, thank you. Was that here in Santa Cruz?
Orlando.
Or in Orlando?
Okay, I couldn't hear you, it's the Pulse shooting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
it was a street memorial to the Pulse nightclub shooting.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they're connected or not. I don't know if it inspired these guys to do this. We don't know that yet. We've interviewed them. I'm not going to go specifically into the interviews, but that did not come up.
Thank you for the question. Right there with the cute little baby.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit or offer a perspective on repainting the mural. And it's easy to assume that repainting it is the way to go moving forward. It's great if we can get those young boys to do it. I think more importantly is that we don't just metaphorically and also literally paint over it. So I wonder if we have resources to actually remove that burnt rubber. That's a scar that's going to live on that mural for a long time. And if we paint a fresh coat of paint on top of it, it's still there.
Yeah.
I don't, burnt rubber, I don't know logistically how that happens, but if there are any resources that we can put to actually repair it.
We'll take that question in. That's a really good question. Many people have asked that in the last day. So Kathy's here, and I think she'll be happy to take that question in. Kathy, I don't know if you have any response right now on that.
I don't. I think Public Works has to do
We have to
evaluation
assess,
of the damage to the street, and so that we, whatever response would be in consultation with them, we have to.
And I'd like to let you all know that, many of us are taking notes today. I do intend to follow up with individual staff. We'll keep either a feed on our news, either on our website, and also you can always email every council member. It's our first initial last name at cityofsantacruz.com, or send it to citycouncil@cityofsantacruz.com. I know all of us are happy to answer any questions after today, but I think also we're developing a list of things that we most likely will bring back and look to bring back to our community for future conversations and for actions. So I want to make sure you know that this is not just a conversation, this is the start of additional conversations and look ahead for everybody. But I want to make sure we get additional. Yes.
If I can just comment on your question, it's not just a matter of black rubber on top of the mural. There's actually grooves dug into the actual mural. So when you get to the evaluation, which was your question, we are certainly comfortable with the felony level, because when you tore up the mural, you're also destroying part of the roadway, you're destroying the paint. You can see in the video the paint being spewed into the air. And so the evaluation is going to be substantial, and we'll have to have the experts actually let us know what the actual dollar amount is, but it is significant.
Good.
Hi. I have a more so a comment than a question. It's very clear to, especially all the black people here, the brown people here, this is not an isolated event. And it's not about just, some young kids having racist thoughts doing a thing. They have a community. I have seen his truck for the last year that I've been here with the Trump flag on the back of it. I knew his truck, like, oh, here he come again. I didn't know who was in it because it's tinted, but we've all seen that truck. On Westcliff, on Capitola, doing too much. He has a community. There's an adult who bought him that truck. There's a house he lives in that truck parks in every day. And the issue is that it's clear that there is a white supremacist community in this area. Not just racist people, not just, they voted for Trump. You can vote for whoever you want. I'm talking about a white supremacist community that has infiltrated itself here in Santa Cruz. And you want to know why they feel safe to be here? Is because the pacifism of the white people in this area allows them to just proliferate. They know they can come to Santa Cruz and be safe. They know they can own local music halls and people still want to go. Because one of the first things I heard about Santa Cruz when I first got here is, so-and-so place downtown is owned by skinheads. Oh, it's owned by skinheads. That's almost common knowledge. How is it that a white supremacist organization can have a stronghold on a historic place in Santa Cruz and it just goes by casually? I know as a black person that if I'm going to Felton, if I'm going anywhere north of Felton, if I ain't got somewhere to go, I ain't getting out the car. Because I know that there are white supremacist communities and organizations that are up there. So, and I had a personal conversation with you where I asked you a few months ago, what are you doing about the possibility that white supremacists could have infiltrated the police department? We've seen this nationwide. We have gang task force for MS-13. We have gang task force for Bloods and Crips. What about the old white boy gangs? What about the they exist here, they proliferate, they show up in meetings, finding out information in order to exonerate their people. So keep an eye out when you hear them asking these questions, because they're building a case. You need to do the same thing. You understand? You do the same thing because they get their cocky and they show up and they put all their cards out on the table immediately. So you have to be understanding that this is not isolated incidents. This is a community that have indoctrinated and raised and radicalized this child. When are we going to address that young white children are being radicalized and turned into terrorists, into domestic terrorists? Those are not just all old people at the Capitol. Those are young people too. What are we doing in Santa Cruz about the fact that children are being radicalized to be white supremacists? Stop just calling it racism or intolerance. This is a criminal organization who seeks to continue to make sure that white people stay in a position of power because they never want to see what happens when black people want something a little more than just equity.
comment in the back, and then we will wrap this up. Again, let's get one more comment, and then we'll wrap things up. Thanks.
Just to follow up on that, this was an act of terrorism, and we should see it as that and prosecute it as that.
Thank you. We got two more hands that flew up. Yeah, go ahead, and then the gentleman in the gray.
This is a comment around the budget and prioritizing budget, and you mentioned there haven't been enough incidents. I strongly encourage you to reevaluate that statement and really look at the police budget. And what is the value of a human life? Is it one incident? How much does that cost? What about the suffering of their family, and their community, and their friends, and their school? That is infinite. And what if it's just not just Black Lives Matter, vandalized? What if someone dies? What if someone gets killed? What's the cost of the priority of your budget? I manage budgets. I understand. You gotta make choices. What is the choice of protecting a community? I'm a woman of color, and I was on the east side of Sierra, so the list out. I come home to this. I was horrified. This is what I come home to. I have children I'm trying to raise. I have biracial children I'm trying to raise. The only thing I don't like about Santa Cruz is not diversity. Make it a place where I would love to make it.
Sir?
And just one more thing on budget. I'm aware, Santa Cruz is losing money, and we spend a lot of money on the police. And it sounds like we're having trouble, making a legal case against this specific action. I was wondering, especially for you, Ms. DA, what could we do to change policy to redefine these terms, so we can close these legal loopholes that might be keeping this bigotry safe. You know what I'm saying? Is there anything we can do on a legal level?
So again, so what we're talking about is California law. So unfortunately, the city doesn't change California law. But like I mentioned earlier, the city attorney's office and I know the council members are committed to looking into seeing if there's anything we can add to our municipal code to the extent that there could potentially be a gap in this type of event. So we're looking into it. We're assessing other cities' municipal codes and trying to determine if there's a path forward for the city to legislate in this area. We do have to be careful because there are certain topics where we might be preempted by state law from moving forward, but we're certainly committed to assessing it and if there's a viable path to bring it forward to council.
Thank you. Okay, last question, and then or go ahead, both of you. Yeah, we have time.
Okay, just to Andy, I follow your personal Instagram and Santa Cruz Police, not my track, excuse me. Well, okay. But it does say, like Isla's point about when we define as like a metric of public safety, I think on a qualitative level, the same way that you at times demonize like drug addiction and other busts that you have. I want to see, just as you were saying, like the condemnation of white friends, just on your personal Instagram. Because I see you uplifting your black friend, but I really want to see the demonization of white friends, because that's what it is. So I just would like, that's a suggestion, and it's not like legally based, but on a qualitative level, that's how we can define communicate. We can show people who are like, oh, what am I going to expect when I go to Santa Cruz? If I look up the chief, he's posting that he condemns white supremacy, period. I'm going to implication. That's more money, city friends. So, definitely want to see how you're practicing Instagram. But I really appreciate you looking at your black friends and community, but just also, at the same time, condemn white supremacy. Please, thank you.
I know we're wrapping up. I just wanted to say to all the black and brown people in the room, I'm so sorry. The example used of a church with a swastika that's destroyed and considered a hate crime, the example of a church burnt and all of that being a hate crime, having an older daughter and a son-in-law go and help paint the letters on the street, Black Lives Matter, those are people. That's not like the individuals and all those who came around and were woken up with the death of George Floyd and walking and marching alongside so many of you. Like, I'm so sorry, and to think sit in pain with you, and I'm so sorry. And I don't want that to be left out of the meeting. There's people in the room that hurt with you. I can never carry the same weight or pain. My story is different from yours, but I want them to know that as I've learned, I'm inspired.
So, Vice Mayor Mayor? Yeah. Vice Mayor Bruno, you want to close this out? And again, thank you everyone, and we will definitely be following up on a number of these things. And we all heard with you. I'm turn it over to this amazing lady.
Thank you. It was really important to have this space and to hear each voice. Thank you. In the back, the side, the middle, and there is this incident, and then there's the bigger ongoing work. So, you know, we have a group of council members. I know at least there's 4 of us here that are working on this. I was on the phone last night for a good chunk of time with our city attorney's office. Thank you for being here, Cassie, to answer all those legal questions. As the mayor said, we do have some meetings lined up because beyond what we can do as a city, there is a state level, there is work to be done with the schools. We don't dictate policy in the schools, but we can work to, together to make sure that happens. The California government website, the U.S. Department of Justice and Community Relations Services, they work with community groups to resolve conflicts and work on alleged hate crimes and hate crime incidences. So they have a whole website that I spent some time pouring through and getting information as preparation to understand where some of those gaps are and where we can fill that in our city policies. Our city policies only go so far, but it's everything, and together we can make, progress forward. I really believe that. Thank you for everyone giving your voice today. There was a lot of anger and pain that needed to be expressed and said, and I appreciate everyone coming and standing here, and thank you for being present.
Is this video isn't online somewhere?
Yes, it's on Facebook. It's Facebook Live, so yeah, it's online.
Facebook Live Santa Cruz.